Good afternoon, disaster and emergency management professionals. My name is Brad Eisen, and I think I'm going to try and keep these Friday afternoon live broadcasts going. I don't know. I think when I used to work at the government, Friday afternoons, for a government person, was pretty nice. He was coming up to the weekend, wasn't too much going on. Maybe the politicians had taken the afternoon off, or the legislature wasn't in. So afternoons in the government were nice, and I can't complain about them. It was a good time to be able to move around, and a lot of people would go out for lunch and just talk and kind of have those needed discussions around the water cooler or the lunch table. And that's what I really liked about being in government, was that ability to take that time and meet with people. And so for myself, I think I'm going to keep that going if I get a good response through these Friday afternoon live casts. And so today I wanted to try and my duck needs to be facing the right way. Today I wanted to try and I tried to get somebody on, see if they wanted to join me on here and have the discussion, but it was a little short notice, so I understand. But if you're on right now and you're listening and you want to come on live with me, let me know. I'll send you the link and get you into the studio. But I know it's short notice and it can be a little nerve-wracking. So, especially because what I wanted to talk about today was diversity in disaster and emergency management within our profession. And I decided to have this as a topic, short notice, just because I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I know a lot of others have been thinking about it. So I just wanted to get a sense of, where people are at. If you're listening now, send me a link or a comment to let me know that my audio and video are okay. And if you have any comments or questions, please add them. That'll help with the discussion. The main reason I wanted to have this discussion today was because I recently turned down a board appointment, and earlier this week I was offered to be on a board, on a membership board for a national committee, and I didn't. I got one. Okay, and so very good. Thank you. The audio is good. So I am going to send an invite here through LinkedIn to Jodi, if you're listening. I'm going to give you a link that's going to bring you into my broadcast studio. So once you get ready, you come on here. This will be awesome. So anyway, I turned down a board position with a national association because after I reviewed their leadership, I'm going to have to get my headphones on for this. After I reviewed their leadership across Canada and their existing board, I didn't think that they needed another perspective from a, mid-40s white male, straight white male. And so I encouraged them to reach out and bring in maybe an Indigenous person in emergency management, or to just do a quick composition analysis of their current board and leadership across Canada, and just look at where they could bring in others from a more diverse background. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have the discussion today, because I think it's been on a lot of people's minds. And, I've never turned down a board appointment before, especially for that reason. And, it was quite awkward and uncomfortable for me, but I think it was necessary. And so we're going to bring in Jodi from Nate. Can't unmute your guest because they chose me. So you're on mute, Jodi. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi.
Why don't you, thank you for doing this. This is awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jodi Manz-Henezi, and I am the program chair for the Disaster and Emergency Management program at NATE. And I'm also a board member with the Canadian Risk and Hazards Network. And it's interesting that you chose this topic because we were just talking about diversity at one of our strategic planning meetings yesterday. So
Okay,
great
awesome.
timing.
Great. What can you share? Are you able to share any juicy details or the general discussion? I don't want to know who said what, but
I think what I can absolutely share is I know from CRH Net's perspective, we're adopting diversity as one of our values for our organization. Certainly it's something that we've always believed in all along, but we recognize that on our list of values, we hadn't explicitly shared that with our membership, and we want to make sure that that's front and center. So that was kind of part of that conversation. Relative to NATE and to other academic programs, I think it's really interesting because, as we think about professionalizing the field of emergency management, I think one of the key things that's going to help us get there and do the critical work that we need to do is we need diversity. We need diversity in terms of not only visual representation, but in terms of skills and talent and all of those things. So again, I think it's a very timely and interesting conversation.
awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that because as I was saying before you logged in, stay off mute because I want you to be able to jump in whenever you want.
Okay.
I was offered a board appointment on a membership board on Monday and I turned it down because after I looked across their current boards and some of their other leadership, for me, I didn't think I could add value as another mid-40s white straight male. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they have the same opinion. I haven't heard back from them, but they have good diversity. It's a good mix of men and women. I know they've got an Asian lady that is a recognized leader in one of the regions and a black male that works on the board. But I didn't see Indigenous representation, and that could have just been through me not being able to find that or see that. But I encourage them to do that analysis, a quick analysis, and ask themselves what level of diversity do we want to be at? Do we need more representation from another group? I was just on a call with someone from the LGBTQ community, and I was asking about, I'm looking to bring into my incident command system group coaching LGBTQ incident commanders. Are they out there? I don't know. Is that even the right thing to ask? So I'm glad to hear that CHRNet is having that discussion and looking at bringing in a value. That is awesome. Mm-hmm.
And I would say just further to that, I think the other important piece to it is not only adding it to the piece of paper, it's we have to live those values. So it's one thing to say that we support diversity, but it's it's our responsibility to make sure that we are living that in everything that we do. So looking, as we're trying to define committee structures and other things, to look at, again, and it's more than just looking for skin color and optics. Mm-hmm. It's diversity and talent and abilities and backgrounds and age and all of those things, because that's where you get, I think, the best results. And there is an optic piece to this as well, for sure, mm-hmm, that we mm-hmm. want people that are, especially people that are disproportionately affected or by disasters or people that are underrepresented. We want them to be able to see, there's people like me, and they can relate to this too. And I think it's important because we're all in this together, and we're a beautiful community, a beautiful melting pot of all these different cultures and people and styles and interests. And I think that's critically important. We want to make sure that there are not voices that are lost, that people have a spot at the table, and that people have the opportunity to contribute, because everybody has something to contribute.
100%. And I like that you brought up the idea of the skills and the abilities as well, because I was having a conversation yesterday where we were talking about developing programs and services from an empathic level. And so this organization who provides resources to all of Alberta, they are actually thinking about taking their staff to the communities that they support, because they all work in Edmonton or Calgary. And so they were looking at how we want to get our staff into the community so they can understand what it's like to live and breathe there. And I know when I worked for AEMA in 2011, we did have, I think, if I got this wrong, somebody out there, please tell me, from AEMA, but I think we sent some staff down to Slave Lake to experience the disaster zone. So when we were thinking about their financial assistance or how to support them, we could meet them at least a common level, or orientate our staff to at least provide that empathic support. And so I think that that's a critical thing too. And yeah, Michelle just said in the comments here, it's hard to show those things through resumes. I identify in the LGBT community, but there's not really a place for that on LinkedIn. So interesting point.
Yep,
Thank you, Michelle. So it's and I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot for CHRNet, but what is the possibility for other organizations out there to create that space for the LGBTQ community within disaster and emergency management? I know when I worked at General Electric, this was back in 2005, we had an LGBTQ and allies committee. And I don't know, in Edmonton and Alberta, for that group to exist, 15 years ago, I think was pretty special. And so that was one way that General Electric helped support LGBTQ and allies in having a safe space.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I'm not sure if I have the answer to it. I think what I would say is, even just what's happening here is opening up the dialogue, having the conversation, and really doing some critical reflection about what have we done as an organization or as an institution to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to have a voice, that everybody has a space, that people feel safe being their authentic self, and recognized for the incredible talents and things that they can offer and what they bring to the table. Again, we're all people, and so I think we're certainly at a point in our culture where we have to figure out ways to get past these barriers that still exist that are preventing people from contributing to the fullest and being included in ways in which every person has the right to be. So I don't know the answer, but I think it starts with the conversation. I think it starts with that recognition of, have we made that space, and what are we doing? What are we doing to make sure that people know that diversity, like going back to what I said, diversity is more than just this word that we're going to put on our webpage, or we're going to put it out there. What are we doing to really model that behavior and live it?
Yeah, and that's I was at the Canadian Mental Health Association conference in October, and I can't remember the speaker's name, but he was talking about mental health, and his point was, we've talked enough. What are organizations and individuals going to do going forward in terms of action, right? At least in Canada, we've talked a lot about it, and there's a lot of lived experience stories out there. Mine is out there on YouTube, and it's what steps are next. And I mean, for me, this is one step that I can take. I know we're talking about it, but I think for me, turning down a board appointment that others would maybe see as an extremely awesome opportunity was kind of my first big step for me, and it was hard and awkward. So now I'm just wondering, what's the next hard and awkward thing I'm going to have to do? That is scary in itself. So yeah, I don't have the answer either.
Well, I think that's great though, because I think it's, having the courage to take actions like that will cause people to stop and really hopefully do some of that reflection, and to your point, make choices to do something differently. So I agree. I think we all have a responsibility to lead this. And, if what we're seeking is change, and change happens with every individual action making a choice to do something different. So you're choosing to do something, or you chose to do something that's a little different than what most people would expect. And I think that's the start of what we're looking for is change.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think over the years, I definitely have seen an opening. Like, I don't know, you can tell me if I'm wrong or right, but um, there's been a significant increase in, I think, women coming up into disaster and emergency management. I don't know if that's just a perception thing or if there's data behind that, or if you notice that from your NATE enrollment. I don't know, but they're like, there's a lot of women being drawn into emergency management, I think, because of the intrinsic ability to support others and
Mhm.
survivors in times of need.
Yeah, well, I could certainly share with you my personal experience as a woman in this
Yep,
field.
go for it.
So, this is my lived experience, and I know for me, my career started way back at about 2009, I think, is when it really started. And back then is I remember going to my very first conference, and I looked around the room and I realized, of the 500 people or so that were in that room, I was one of the very few women that was there. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So since then, I think it's happened for a couple of reasons. Definitely, we're seeing more and more women. I can certainly speak about the NATE program. Even when I took over the program a couple of years ago, there was still a higher percentage of men than women. Even, we had certain age demographics were more represented than others, and we've really seen things level out quite a bit. In fact, I might even argue that I might have just a few more females in my program now than
Okay.
males, which is really interesting. So
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
think I think we're definitely starting to see it. And I think your point around, disasters as being really a socially constructed phenomena. It's the human suffering, the human
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability. And I think, that one of the interesting things between men and women is, women are hardwired to sort of be those caregivers. And so maybe that's what part of the attraction is. Not saying that that's not a capacity for men as well. It certainly
Mm-hmm.
is. But I think it's different. And I think just the field itself is changing, is that, we're moving away from some of the paramilitary command and control, sort of the things that were
Yeah.
typically male dominated fields.
Yeah.
And, this is about, advocacy and education and awareness, and all those things that women are just as, successful in doing as men. So the field has morphed, and therefore the people that are doing the work also that who's representing it needs to change accordingly as well. And we're definitely starting to see it. I will say it's a little bit slow, but um,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen huge changes. And yeah, so as a woman, that's what
Yeah.
I can say.
That's good. That's good to hear, because I mean, I like, personally, I was told at the government that, my chances of being an incident commander in the provincial operations center, it was like they were not willing to put me in there because I didn't have some experience or something. I don't know. It was never really clearly
Mhm.
articulated to me. Likely I didn't have boots on the ground experience or military experience. And they let me play incident commander during an exercise once, and I was told that that was a developmental opportunity, but that was the last time I was ever in that role in 2017. So maybe I horribly sucked at it. I don't know, but I never got that feedback as a guy. I never got
Mhm.
that feedback, and I
Mhm.
know I don't think uh, at the government of Alberta, I don't think there's been a female incident commander with the green vest. I don't think they've trained any to get close to that. And what they really say is that, well, it comes down to the boots on the ground experience. And I'm like, well, there's lots of military veteran female women out there, and lots of women willing to want to step into that role. So what is really, let's just put it out there, and what is really holding a lot of people back from these positions? Because I don't think anybody going in to be a medical doctor expects to be in the emergency room doing heart surgery on a gunshot wound victim after they get their PhD. But they are trained and developed to go into that situation from all sorts of backgrounds. But in emergency management, we seem to still be told time after time, if you don't have boots on the ground experience, how are you going to be an incident commander?
Yeah.
Well,
sorry.
I know the answer, but anyway, I'd like to hear from you.
No, I think it's so interesting because, I would agree. I think of all the exercises that I've participated in, which has been quite a few, I've only seen one female incident commander.
Okay.
And I myself have done the incident commander training. I think I was one of maybe, I think there was 3 females that were in that particular training class. And I have boots on the ground experience. However, the difference is that my boots on the ground experience is with the humanitarian sector. So it doesn't seem to have the same perception around credibility. That's my experience. It's like, well, yeah, you were there, but you were, kind of dealing with the human suffering side versus the sort of command and control side. So therefore, the experience might not be seen as exactly the same. And I would argue, but outside of that, I have a significant amount of, leadership experience. So I do, however, so that being said, I am very hopeful that people are changed that the field continues to morph and change, and that people are given the opportunity based on their current abilities that they're able to demonstrate, and that's it. That would be the ideal situation. And regardless of men, women, race, sexual orientation, all of that, people are allowed to assume these roles based on what they bring to the table at that time, period.
Yeah, there's a comment. I hope I say his name, Camilo. Thank you for commenting. He says, with all due respect, we have a lot of personal biases on the limitations of roles and positions in EM. And I would agree with that. I think there's personal biases, there's cultural bias. I think that's what he's trying to say, is that it is difficult to overcome those biases set on us by others in the EM profession. And he says, particularly when it comes to our own capacities and capabilities.
Well, that's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I would too. And I know Camilo, I think he's a fellow jiu-jitsu guy. He's I talked to him on LinkedIn a little bit. So I particularly when it comes to our own capacities and capabilities, and I wonder, I'm gonna throw this out there, Camilo, and see if I'm interpreting your comment correctly. But is that maybe centered around some people may not have the confidence that they are capable to be in that role, and that's maybe what holds them back a little bit. I don't know if that's kind of what you're saying with that or not, but if you can clarify that, that would be great. I know for me, I was extremely scared to be in the Provincial Operations Center for Slave Lake fires. Like, it was scary. And unfortunately, though, the culture is, well, you just got to get in the hot seat. It's stressful. You'll learn under stress. Well, I did learn. I learned, though, that the stress gave me migraines and made me feel really depressed. I don't know how it helped my performance in that role. So, I also have a bit of an issue with that idea that the only way you can learn is to get thrown off in the deep end before being taught the fundamentals. I don't think that's right either.
Yeah. I think it's always nerve-wracking the first time you do anything, right? But I
Yeah.
think, if we had and I definitely see some really great examples of this, but I think it starts right from the beginning. And certainly as an educator, I'm clearly biased. One of the things that we try to do in our program is we start off, the students coming into our program have to do like a whole thing around individual resiliency. And it's to
Yeah.
really work on how do we safeguard ourselves. And then we work on trying to build their confidence over their program with having them try, increasingly more difficult roles as it might be. And but I mean, it comes to peer mentorship, it comes to
Hmm.
support, it comes to the level of training and opportunities, and it comes down to personality sometimes too. And
Yeah.
here's the thing: not everyone's needs to be an incident commander. I
Hmm.
mean, that's just
Hmm.
one example of the many, many, many roles that really talented and invested disaster and emergency management professionals can fill. But our goal is to not get to that response point. Let's try to do
Yeah.
more on the front end and the back end so that we don't do that. So maybe we need to emphasize that more. So I see a couple more comments. So let's just see.
Yeah, Camilo, again, he says, I do feel that we suffer of imposter syndrome as well
Mm,
as a lot of Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm not familiar with that one, but indeed, we limit ourselves by not believing in ourselves. So absolutely,
yeah,
there's a lot of that going around.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
And, for me, I know I will never, well, I shouldn't say never, but I don't want to be an incident commander at the incident command post of a giant fire or flood. That's not the IC role I'm talking about. I was talking about at a provincial level, which
Mm,
is really, you know, uh, not that hectic. It's not stress. You're not at the event mobilizing resources. The government doesn't have resources. You're supporting communications and coordination in that. So it's a fast paced, I don't know, people are going to get mad at me for this, but it's a fast paced management cubicle position where you're trying to help the government agencies communicate the information into the reporting that goes up government. You're signing off on procurement and contracts. You're helping to approve schedules. You're making sure the municipalities impacted are doing well and that the field operations are doing well. You're not in the thick of it, and there's time. There's time to make decisions. There's time to have meetings and times to consult.
mm-hmm,
It's a lot easier than being on the ground for sure, and I don't want to be on the ground.
mm-hmm.
So if there's anyone out there listening who is an IC on the ground, I'd be very curious to know what you think about mentorship and support to move people up in those roles under the umbrella of diversity and trying to help support that. The
And while we're waiting for some of that, I just want to make another comment too. And I think it's interesting too to think about certainly diversity in terms of representation of who is contributing and being and is a member in this field. I think that's really important. But even diversity in terms of what do we think a disaster and emergency professional is, we still
yes,
go back to that I see, like we
yeah,
think those are the roles, right? Those are the roles. If you're a leader in disaster and emergency management, you have to be filling one of those roles. And I guess what I would say is that there's uh, such a huge multitude of positions and opportunities within this field that deserve equal respect. So the incident commander position is very important and it deserves respect, but so do all the people that are
yeah.
helping to develop policy and the people that are working in the humanitarian sector, and they deserve equal respect because this work requires all of those things to come together in order to safeguard people and the environment and property and the economy and all those things. We need to sort of honor all of the diversity that is needed to sort of make any strides in disaster and emergency management, to make any strides towards resiliency and all those things. We need diversity of people and we need diversity of roles.
I love that idea of equal respect regardless of the position. I'll let that sink into anyone who's watching right now, because I think that is true. And it's hard because, especially in ICS, you have badges and vests that identify you at different levels. So it's very visible that you're the IC, you're the safety liaison, you're the logistics person, and there is a hierarchy, right, that demands different respect. But just and I get it, it has to happen in that environment because it's quick paced. You need to know who's in charge, you need to know who's the decision maker. But outside of that, right, it needs to be a bit more of a flat organization, collaboration, on the graph sort of. We manage like an airport, we don't manage like a top down. And that goes back to your early comment about trying to move away from that command and control idea to you know
Well, I think there, like there is a place, but it sort of goes back to the fundamental change. I think that we're starting to see as we work towards professionalization is that maybe that's not the position we aspire to necessarily, because I always tell my students this, and I'm sure there's some students that are watching, and I say response should only be about 5% of the work that we ever do. If we're doing our jobs really well, we're spending more time on the mitigation and the preparedness and making smart decisions and advocating for change during recovery, so that we're not in this, sort of self-perpetuating cycle of disasters, that we can try to minimize these impacts a little bit. And if that's the case, then, those response specific positions, maybe that's not, there's other places where equally important work is being done and should be done that deserves equal recognition.
Yes, and that and sort of along that lines, like, I want to recognize, and I hope, it's okay that I go here because we're live, and I want to recognize your work at NAIT, and bringing that program along to the eventual center of excellence that exists today. I know that you did a lot of the work and visionary work that has led up to where that center is today. And like, kudos to you for having that vision and being able to navigate all the work that it takes to get a team in place that is running that center today. So I'm super excited on where you see emergency management going, because if you had that vision years and years ago and it came to light, what's going to manifest going forward. Not to put you on the spot, but I wanted to put that out there because I think we need to do a better job of recognizing our leaders in this community.
Oh, I appreciate that.
And have the history and story of how things evolved.
Yeah, it started, there was a dream, and that dream has now become a reality, and it'll continue to grow from there, and that's exciting. And the dream is to have a space, have a place where people, no matter where they're at in their career, would have a space to come and train and learn and share and collaborate and do all of those things. And that was the dream, and that's the dream that's now become a reality. So it's pretty exciting. So I don't know what comes next, but all I can say is I know I'm a big dreamer, so I'm always thinking about what can come next. But I think I'm very excited about what the future holds for people coming into this profession, and people making a choice to contribute to this. The world is going to need more people, like everyone on this call and everyone that participates in this field, because things are going to get a little bit tougher and harder. And with all of the global trends that we're facing, this job isn't going to get easier, but we need more innovation and more talent and more visioning and more dreams and more thinking out of the box, more challenging the status quo, and just not accepting that, we're just going to go from disaster to disaster. We have to start thinking different. So.
Yeah, what do you think is you know, we've got vampire fish, COVID-19, like all these crazy things that people. What's next for Canada on the risk and hazard platform? Like, I'm worried about heat waves. I
Yeah.
don't think we are at all ready to deal with a 2 week, 45-degree heat wave anywhere in this country.
Mm-hmm.
That one scares the heck out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And cyber threats. Like, look at Australia just last week. Um, you know, I tell a lot of people I'm worried about the 2 week heat wave where the internet is down. I don't know if that's,
Yeah,
but
I think those are pretty realistic things, and those are the types of things, like I said, that we need to have more diverse pools of talent that can help us solve these problems, and figure out how to mitigate these problems. Some of them we can't solve, but we can certainly prepare and mitigate for them a lot better than what we currently do. I would agree. I think heat waves, droughts,
mhm.
with all the urbanization, food security is already going to be an issue.
Yeah,
And so then you add on the environmental or the climate impacts,
yeah.
the changes that we're seeing, and it just becomes, it exacerbates significantly. So I think that's a pretty real concern. I think, yeah, and as a Canadian, I'm not a fan of the heat, so
Mm.
it'll be really interesting to see where things go with that.
What?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What if we can't go ice skating because it's
Mm,
just too hot in the winter?
mhm.
So okay. So I wanted to all. You got time? How's your time?
Good.
You're good. Okay. Earlier, you mentioned that the NATE program takes an initial focus on emotional resilience.
Hmm.
And I love that. I love that your program starts off with helping students be prepared for the mental health aspects of the job and getting ready for that. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you focus on and if there's, I don't know, some resources people can turn to? I don't know if you've got any off the top of your head, but
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't recall all the resources that we have in there,
yeah.
but I know that we really, we are, as instructors, most of us are trained in the road to mental. We've done the road to mental readiness program. We've also done a number of programs through Mental Health Canada. So just really looking at ways that we can safeguard our own selves. Really out of respect, and we see this after every major incident. The numbers of people in this field who are negatively impacted for a long time, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, physically, how many people, we lose to suicide
Mm-hmm.
and even addictions. And and that's really real. I mean, when you're part of having to make a really tough decision, as an example, I remember speaking to a former colleague of mine who was supporting the Fort McMurray fire, and he wasn't the one that was making the decision to um, bulldoze the houses to create the fire
Oh
break.
yeah, yeah.
And but the emotional impacts, he was there at the scene and he saw possessions, and it weighed heavily on him for a long time, to the point that it led to some very serious depression, and there was some support that was needed. And so these are very real things. And I think, one of the good things I think that we're seeing in the field is that that's another thing that we're not only talking about, but we're starting to do more about, because we realize, we talk about this outward push for resiliency. Communities need to be resilient, and organizations need to be resilient, and so on. And we forget that it all starts with us. It all starts
Mm-hmm.
with individuals. And we really need to focus on individual resiliency and protecting ourselves first and foremost, because we can't do our work if we're not strong, and or if we don't have the supports in place where we know it's okay to have that emotional moment, or to step away and say, I need a break, and nobody's going to judge you for it. We're still very, people want to look tough and strong and they can do everything, but we're humans. And these are very human events with very human consequences. And I would be concerned if people weren't demonstrating some type of impact, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So that's really important to us. So we use a lot of the Mental Health Canada resources for sure.
Okay.
We work through some self-care things with the students. So they have to do things like positivity journals and other reflective journaling. And we carry on with some of that throughout the program so that, it's just helping them develop strategies for coping and for processing. This year, we're starting a peer mentorship program. So, having peers that are, they, they're set up with people that, they can say, look, I I watched an exercise and I was really disturbed by, I was thinking, oh, that could happen
Awesome.
in my community. So how can we talk through this and support each other? So getting them familiar with this is the way that we should be practicing disaster and emergency management, whether we're a student or we're out in the field or whatever, is we should be creating networks of supports and we should know where we can get the help that we need.
I love that peer support idea. So,
Student
Albert,
initiated, I have to tell you, this
is
was
it
led by the students. Yes.
awesome? That's the best. That's the best way.
Mm-hmm.
Like Alberta Justice and Solicitor General put in a peer support program a few years ago, just to help kind of manage the culture, and things like that. And they like, if someone is listening from their quote, tell me if I'm wrong, but they had thousands of staff access and sign up to be part of this program.
It's amazing.
Just for this one ministry. And that was in a culture that's very law enforcement heavy. And so there was a need for that peer support. But so I think that student initiative you got going, I love to hear stories like that. They always take off.
Yep.
And yeah, and then back, I wonder how many people in EOCs these last 4 months, like how many EOCs struggled to schedule people because either people were having to take time off or they were calling in sick, or they just couldn't come in just because of the stress.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love, that would be a good study. Because I was talking to my wife last night actually about, I noticed how since the kids have been out of school, nobody in our house has been sick for like 4.5 months. And I'm like, to go back to an environment where parents are sending kids to school sick and its staff are coming to work sick, like that has such an impact on everybody's well-being. Yeah. Like just stay home. If you're sick, stay home, regardless of COVID-19. Don't bring it into our schools and workplaces and shopping malls. I love not having a cold for the last 5 months. Like, I feel great.
Mm-hmm.
So what, I don't know, like, where are we at? How are you feeling? Or do you want to?
I just want to talk about Camilla's last point, and it says if we're talking ICS, unfortunately, there are not many real-world situations that allow for that process of mentorship. Preparedness-wise, exercises and training allows us to develop that experience, but it's a lot about being lucky or unlucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. So that's the fundamental truth. I mean, like I would agree with sometimes it's not what it's about where you are at that moment in time that determines who is going to be doing what, for sure. I do want to sort of talk about that process of mentorship, though, which is really, really interesting. And I know one of the things that's been on my mind a lot is really talking about, again, as we're transitioning in this profession, and we kind of have and I mean this with all respect. So I call them the old guard and the new guard. We have kind of the people that we typically, when we thought about who was going to fill this role, we had, maybe an image that would pop in our head of a certain person, maybe a certain gender, going back to diversity, maybe wearing a certain uniform, going back to that. And we now have these, this incredible group of people that are wanting to be part of this, that see this as a viable profession, that see this as an area that they can really contribute to. And we need to honor what was and what needs to be, and we need to have better mechanisms for mentorship to be a normal part of just the way that we exist in this field. And I would argue that we haven't done a good job with that. I think that we still have an awful lot of work to do to sort of bridge the gap between, like I said, the what was or who was in terms of holding some of those positions, and the what needs to be. So more work needs to be done there for sure. There's a huge opportunity for more targeted mentorship and bridging those gaps.
Yeah, and I know there's a large population of semi-retired, retired fire chiefs, disaster directors of emergency management, managers from the municipal level.
Yeah.
That would love to help the next generation.
Yep.
You know, and would love to be in contact with others that want to listen and learn and just talk.
Yep.
And I think it's therapeutic for them in a way, right? To talk about some stuff.
Yeah, and it's hard because those are all people that often have a number of other responsibilities on their plate. So to carve out the space to talk specifically about their experiences and disasters is sometimes a little tricky with everything else that's piled on top of them. But I think it starts very much, Brad, and kudos to you with things like what you're doing here, creating opportunities for people to come and dialogue, creating some panel discussions or some opportunities that people can weigh in. I think that's going to really help as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I didn't know you could see the comments, so that's good to know. Yeah. And then I wanted to try out this additional view because I got view options on the here, and I wanted to see what that one looks like, but I like this one better. Yeah. Okay. So Michelle had to go. Thanks, Michelle, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I don't know. This turned out to go a lot better than I had hoped, being on here by myself. So thank you very much for your bravery. Ron Robinson, now here talking about someone who's got lots of time to mentor. Just okay. So when EOC, ECC leadership immediately reduces high-level stress by stating to the IMT, no one fails in this, we will undergird, I think he might have been undergrid, and support one another. No one gets thrown under the bus, thereby creating a safe place to a productive environment. Right. Nobody gets thrown under the bus. I love that, because you don't want to be scared that you making a minor decision and getting fired or something.
And I think that's just
I'm gonna put that up there so people can read it.
I think, very cool. I think that's not just a quality of EOC, ECC leadership, I would argue, or I would suggest, Ron. I think that's the quality of any good leader. Any good leader should be, that we are in this together, that there's no such thing as failure here. And I think it's up to every leader to make sure that the people around them know that they're all in it together. So I would say that's a quality of any good leader.
Yeah, and it's hard. I know because it's those high stress times where, when you're in the office day to day, Wednesday afternoon, it was always easy for me to reflect on being a leader at the time. But when you're in the EOC, ECC, absolutely, it's harder to be mindful of that. And I know Ron is very, very supportive of creating those safe environments to learn and to pass his stories down and his experiences. He's been very supportive of me with developing the ICS coaching that we got coming up. He's co-facilitating with me. So thanks, Ron. I'm learning a lot from him. I'm sure that he's a very patient guy with me and probably sees me doing, saying things that are probably I need to slow down on, but he's been a great support. So I appreciate that wisdom from him. And, I think, with your students, other students, my advice to them is don't be afraid to reach out and contact people. Like, some are going to be jerks about it and ghost you or whatever. But don't be scared. Get used to the rejection so you can keep going forward.
Yeah, and I just want to comment on Camilla's comment here that you posted. Thank you for that. I could not agree with you more.
Yeah.
I could not agree with you more. I think emotional intelligence, which is, let's face it, anyone that works in disaster and emergency management has to have some leadership skills. Emotional intelligence is critical to that. You have to understand how you interact with other people, how people see you, how you kind of fit into our human social context. That's how you're truly successful. So thank you for bringing that up. That's an amazing point.
Yeah, emotional intelligence. I like to throw in there kind of like what you were saying about individual resilience, but emotional resilience,
Mm-hmm.
knowing what's going to trigger you and being ready for those times so you can stay positive, productive. All ties into the same thing. But thanks, Camila. That's an awesome comment. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. All right. If you are out there right now watching and you've got a comment or a question, throw it out there. I'm going to ask Jodi if are you okay if because I can download these videos and take the audio. Are you okay if I post? It's going to stay on LinkedIn, but are you okay if I post it elsewhere?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Thank you. So I don't know. We're looking forward to this forum. Collaborative competence breeds absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that competence. We need, I think, in disaster emergency management, absolutely need to spend some more time focusing on behavioral competencies. We've done so much building up our technical
Mm-hmm.
competencies through ICS and planning and all those other things, how to deal with industrial oil spills and everything. But behavioral competencies is where we need to get to help with our governance, our leadership, our ethics, our literacy in science, technology, all of that. So yes, I think, and that's where you guys are, Nate's kind of headed, right? With you've got leadership, you have leadership in your program. Yeah.
We do. Yep.
Developing leadership competencies. I think that's wonderful, and that's where we got to get to. And that's Camila's comment about emotional intelligence. That's where that's going to breed and come to life, is through competency development.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's leave it there. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if we'll get more comments or questions, but let's leave it there. I appreciate your bravery and courage for off the hop, just having me shoot you the link to join us and to have this conversation. This, I like it. I love it. This is the stuff I love to do, and I really appreciate your engagement with us.
Well, I thank you, and I was excited. I know we kind of strayed a little bit away from diversity, but I think to go back to the earlier comments that we have around, being a bit vulnerable and modeling the behavior we expect to see, and part of that is having the courage to have the conversation. So that this is me trying to do that, and I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to participate. So I look forward to seeing more of these live LinkedIn sessions in the future. I think it's a
we should
way to
do this
dialogue.
again. Let's do this again. I like, we started with diversity, and it led us down a road to emotional intelligence. Collaborative competence breeds confidence. Like we had a wide spectrum, and that's kind of what I want through this forum.
Perfect.
And I'm not looking for sound bites, and I'm not looking for surface level discussion. I'm looking for below the water level discussion on a lot of these topics within our profession. So people can listen and hopefully start to develop action results in some of these areas.
Yep.
Where can people find out more about CHRNet and Nate? And if you want them to contact you with questions about either, what's the best way?
Oh, sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. CRHNet, we're just in the process of relaunching our new website, and we're going to have a virtual symposium in the fall that's going to be amazing. And really, our focus this year is on, our theme is resilience realized. So, very very much aligned with what we're talking about today. But crhnet.ca is our website for that. For the NATE program, if you go to nate.ca and you type in disaster and emergency management, that'll take you to our program, or to the Center for Applied Disaster and Emergency Management, which was that lab that Brad was speaking about as well. Okay. And I'm happy to receive any comments, questions, queries. This is something, like Brad, I'm very passionate about, so I'm happy to engage with anybody. And you can reach me directly at jodim@NAIT, that's NAIT.ca.
Awesome. They can find you on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Are you on Twitter? Not
no.
Yet? Okay.
I am, and I'm not. So something I'm going to work on. Yes.
Okay, and so to anyone left listening, this will be available. This talk will be available through VHS. I'm going to transfer this onto VHS. Just call me, and I'll send you a copy. That's a joke. I was like,
I don't even have a VCR. I don't even know what you're talking about. But okay.
I was talking to a friend earlier this morning, and I've got video VHS tapes in my bookshelf.
Oh.
And he's like, "Oh, you got to send those out or something." And I'm like, "For these, I'm just going to start telling people that I'm recording these on VHS, and if they want a copy, I'll send it through the mail."
Fair enough. I love it.
So I'm not really, though. It's just a joke.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your time, and we will talk again.
Sounds good. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, Jodi. Everyone. Cheers.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back later, and if you've missed most or some of this, it will be available on LinkedIn or through hazardscape.com. Stay connected.